The Narrative State Podcast with Sabrina's Speakeasy. Episode 1, The Scenery Trick, The Murder of Charlie Kirk. If you want to understand American politics, don't start with the Constitution. Start with a crime scene. Because every time something violent happens in this country, we don't ask what failed. We ask, who do we blame on camera? Today we're talking about the murder of Charlie Kirk, not as a whodunit, not as an internet gossip, but as a narrative autopsy. Not who pulled the trigger, not what time it happened, but who benefits and why the story unfolded the way it has. Because as Mr. X says in JFK, the how and the who is just scenery for the public. The real question, the only question, is why. Before he was a corpse, he was a character. Charlie Kirk wasn't just a guy with a podcast. He was a youth conservative mascot, a fundraising symbol, a pipeline for donor class messaging, a political brand asset, a professional culture warrior packed for mass appeal. To his followers, he was the kid who sees through the BS of the liberal elite. To his critics, he was a meme machine. To his funders, he was a strategic investment. When someone like that dies violently, the tragedy is real, but the narrative value is also immediately activated. A martyr is worth more to the machine than a mouthpiece. The moment the news broke, the scenery switched on. The scenery is the emotional theater. Looped montage clips, outrage pundits, crying commentators, fast blame headlines, hashtags telling you which side to pick, and a 24-hour news cycle demanding that you feel before you think. Notice what's missing from the scenery. Who stood to gain narrative capital? Which political actors used the tragedy to push policy? Who redirected public anger and where? The scenery keeps you hypnotized. The machinery stays off screen. Who benefits? Whenever someone dies violently in American political life, the first question shouldn't be who did it. It should be who needed this. After Kirk's death, we saw short-term benefits, instant fundraising surges, a fresh martyr for the movement. The left is violent, messaging spiked. New purity tests. If you criticize him, you're supporting the killer. It weaponized grief as political leverage. Long-term benefits. Emotional permission to escalate rhetoric. Justification for new security measures, censorship and surveillance, strategic fear conditioning, consolidation of loyalty around whoever frames the story most effectively. The death becomes political capital. The tragedy becomes infrastructure. The person becomes propaganda. Here's the deeper truth. We live in a country trained to distrust everything. Americans no longer believe any official narratives. Declassified and meticulously picked over content has taught us about COINTELPRO, MKUltra, the Iraq War WMD lie, mass surveillance, Palantir exposure, the Epstein cover-ups, the Pentagon's entertainment influence, political polarization, and algorithmic chaos. Distrust isn't irrational, it's earned. So when Charlie Kirk dies in violence, no one believes the first story. No one believes the second. And by the third, everyone has built their own. Truth collapses under the weight of competing storylines. Because Americans don't consume facts, we consume plots. And whoever tells the most emotionally satisfying plot wins. Not the most truthful plot, not the most responsible plot, not the plot that fixes anything. Just the plot that hits the nervous system the hardest. The anatomy of a narrative killing. Violent political deaths do 4 things. They create unity through fear. Fear melts ideology. It reinforces tribe. They reassign guilt. Even before evidence surges, blame is allocated by identity, not investigation. They create new enemies of the movement. Anyone who deviates from the narrative, even slightly, becomes suspect. That's why we see a plethora of "Candace goes crazy" thumbnails lately, right? A country trained to distrust everything. Lastly, they reboot the movement's emotional engine. Remember how Trump's first assassination attempt was the first domino in Joe Biden's withdrawal from the 2024 election? Outrage is renewable energy in American politics. When movements weaken, martyrdom restores vitality. This is the psychology of the narrative state. Charlie Kirk's death matters, but the narrative machinery built on top of it matters more, because that machinery outlives him and his message. The scenery is the spectacle, the tears, the blame, the rhetoric, the montage clips. The machinery is the strategy. Who benefits? Who reframes the event? What power consolidates? What freedoms shrink? What fears harden into doctrine? America isn't governed, it's narrated. And someone always is writing the script. Next episode, I'll reveal the mythic genealogy behind modern conspiracy culture. Crowley, Hubbard, Epstein, the elite sex cult industrial complex. Because this story didn't start with Charlie Kirk. It started a century ago with a man in a robe calling himself the Beast. Keep an open mind, but don't believe the bullshit.